This is the Only in Louisiana podcast with Michelle Southern.
There is no shortage of incredible, did this really happen stories to come out of our great state, which really is what this podcast is all about. And the story you are about to hear was dug up by Lamar White Jr. Lamar's website, BayouBrief.com, describes him as a writer of the people, the politics, and the magic of Louisiana. Hailing from central Louisiana, Lamar's story initially caught my eye because it begins noting how many public figures in our state's history have had their Wikipedia pages completely deleted. And in 2022, something like that might as well wipe any historical figure off the grid forever, right? I didn't even know it was a thing to have a Wikipedia page deleted. I can see why something like that would infuriate a Sin-Law writer like Lamar. So I caught up with him to tell us about an 80s era Alexandria, Louisiana mayor, John K., a.k.a. Tilly Snyder, and specifically the Great Catfish Massacre of 1985.
Tilly Snyder, colorful figure, central Louisiana. And the reason that I thought this would be an interesting story, first of all, is because his Wikipedia entry was deleted. And this upset me as someone who's considers himself to be, a fan of Louisiana history and a politics junkie. There was a guy in central Louisiana who wrote a series of Wikipedia entries for notable figures in Sin-Law, and he was caught plagiarizing on Wikipedia. So they banned him, and then they took down a bunch of entries, including Tilly Snyder. His real name is John Kenneth Snyder, but he went by the nickname Tilly after Tiddlywinks, the childhood, children's game. But among many other stories about him, and they are legion. There's stories about him confiscating a police car, appropriating a police car for his own use. About him taking the door off of the men's room because he believed that his staff was spying on him, and other stories involving him kind of having a nervous breakdown and rummaging through garbage bins in the back of, I think, the city police department, ranting about Russian spies. But he's probably best known and most remembered for what he decided to do with the Alexandria city swimming pool. He had this really delusions of grandeur about his this vision that he had for the future of Alexandria's economy. He thought that he had the keys to the city's success, and it was investing in the catfish farming business. This was in the early to mid 80s, 1985 specifically. The city had a swimming pool near the zoo, which is on Masonic Drive in the middle of Alexandria. And the zoo is a fantastic destination, and it's accredited by the AVA, and really a great, if you haven't been to the Alexandria Zoo, I totally recommend it. The swimming pool is still, you can actually still see the outline of the pool if you go on Google Maps and look for the Alexandria Zoo on Google Maps. You can find it.
That was going to be one of the questions that I asked. So this was an actual public pool where people had once attended to swim in for recreation. That's the kind of pool that it was?
Correct. And I think what happened is that there were some deferred maintenance issues. And depending on who you believed at the time, the estimates for repair ranged anywhere from like $5,000 to $500,000. So
that's a pretty wide margin there.
Pretty significant, yeah. And I think really what needed to be done, honestly, I think they just needed to repaint it. But this was, this is still the Deep South in the 1980s, and Alexandria is like many places in the South has some challenges with race relations. The swimming pool was seen by a lot of people in the white community as something that was an unnecessary expense. It was primarily used by kids from the inner city. That's where it was situated. At any rate, Tilly Snyder thought that he could, I guess, broker a deal to make both sides happy and the city money at the same time. So he I guess he issued some sort of request for proposals for a piece of land that the city had out by the port, which is on the Red River. He wanted the city of Alexandria to partner with a catfish farming business, and that this would make, we would share revenue from this new business. The city would be, I guess it was a group out of Ouachita Parish he would be partnering with.
Mm-hmm.
And he figured that he needed a workforce training initiative to teach people about how to catfish farm. So the folks up in Ouachita Parish that he was partnering with offered to donate 1,000 pounds of live catfish to stock the city swimming pool.
Put catfish in the public pool.
Yes. As opposed to repairing the pool, painting it or anything like that, they were just going to fill it up with water from the city water supply. I think they had fire trucks out there pumping water in for like 3 or 4 days. And then they would stock it with the catfish, and it was to be free for children under the age of 13. But he saw it as an educational experience. This would be a way to teach people how to farm catfish. It was as you may imagine, it was a disaster from the very beginning.
Right. It doesn't sound like anything good can come from this, just as an average person looking in or hearing it like that.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those feel good projects about reclaiming, reinvesting and improving infrastructure and, reinventing an old asset into something new. This was kind of a junky pool. It was kind of trashed already, and it didn't improve the actual facilities. What he did actually didn't enhance the facility at all,
Yeah.
But so I guess the announcement was set, I think sometime in March of '85, and they had put, I guess, the first maybe 500 pounds of catfish in the pool. Unfortunately, Mayor Snyder forgot about the fans that operated, the fans that, the pumping equipment and the fans for the pool that were still in operation. He thought that he could improve them, I think. There's something like that. He thought that he was going to install a new system for the catfish pond.
Well,
right?
Isn't that what pumps oxygen into the water?
Right.
Okay.
So the zoo director at the time, a guy named Les Witt, who's sort of a legend in Alexandria, a young Les Witt, was alarmed by this and warned Mayor Snyder that he believed that there was too much oxygen in the water already, and that it would be pretty dangerous to stock it with fish, that the fish would all die. Snyder, I guess, dismissed those concerns and purchased some new equipment that was installed, but they forgot to install the cover for the fan blades. You can imagine, it was just exposed to the pool.
Right.
So when they dumped the catfish in, the catfish, and this was actually recorded on live television, I'm told. Les Witt did an interview with KLV on the day that the catfish pond was to open, and he's standing in front of the camera and he's trying to block out the swimming pool because literally catfish are being slaughtered by this fan.
As they are being dumped into the pool.
Yeah, as they were being dumped into the pool, it took, I think by the end of the first day, half of the catfish were killed.
Oh my gosh.
And I really don't know how many total were there. I know it was 1,000 pounds. But at the very end, when they finally decided after 2 days of this, that this was not going to work out, I think that there were only 35 or 36 catfish left, which they then just dumped into Bayou Henson. But as you can imagine, this gave Mayor Snyder a lot of sort of unwanted publicity and was covered in national publications, and Alexandria became the punchline of several jokes that year. And like I said, most people remember Mayor Snyder for the catfish pond incident. I think it may have even made the Washington Post at the time.
The Great Catfish Massacre of 1985. I love how you describe it there.
Yeah, he was an interesting character, Snyder. He was really, aside from this sort of erratic and bizarre decision to invest in the catfish farming business, which the city, by the way, did not end up doing. Make that clear. With their workforce training initiative in shambles and having massacred all of the catfish that they were supposed to have for educational purposes, there was no appetite for the catfish farming business anymore. At this point in his career, he was advancing in age, and he was already very known to be very erratic, and did not get along that well with the city's sort of blue blood establishment. But I don't want to make fun of him completely, because he did some good things for the city of Alexandria. And even though I'm sure he was like many people at the time, many white people, he was definitely a racist. He actually did some things to improve race relations in the city. I think his intention for the catfish pond was actually, his heart was in the right place,
Yeah, but
we no longer have a city swimming pool.
Yeah. Well, what happened to the pool?
Today the zoo took over that land, so the zoo eventually wants to expand their footprint. I don't know if it's still on the books, and open up like an African exhibit at the zoo. So that's where it would be, where that land is. And like I said, if you look it up on Google Maps, Alexandria Zoological Park on Masonic Drive in Alexandria, Louisiana, you can still see the outline of a swimming pool in I think, probably the back left.
And one of the interesting things about this, Lamar, when I was doing some research on it, really, it kind of stopped and ended with you, because there's not a lot of information, period, on Tilly Snyder anywhere to be found.
Right. I mean, this is what really, like I said, again, it's what frustrated me about Wikipedia's decision to delete all of these entries for people in central Louisiana. That one person basically had written, probably 90% of this content. I don't even think he plagiarized anything with respect to Mayor Snyder, but no one objected to the removal of this entry. And so it went away. And unfortunately, like you said, it's just difficult to find information on him. What I did is I actually just scoured newspapers.com. The Town Talk is the entire archives of the Town Talk are online, dating back to like 1868 or something like that.
Awesome.
So those are really good resource. And also, I talked to people that remember that were there, involved in city government, and remember it well at the time, and got the real story. It was definitely that they were chopped to pieces by the fans, but there are stories that that other people have told, that the catfish were essentially put in the wrong kind of water and suffocated or choked or something like that. From what I gather, that is not true. It was the fan that killed them. It looked like, but Les Witt, the zoo director, who unwittingly had found himself in front of the camera while this massacre was going on, compared it to a scene in Jaws.
That it looked like they were chumming for sharks.
That's it.
I that stuck out in my mind when I was reading your article, because that is the scene in Jaws is exactly what I pictured. So
yeah, and it's on camera. I thought, so, if anyone from KALB wants to search their archives for, I think it was March of 1985. I think I have the date somewhere in this article. It should be there. This is something, by the way, that Les Witt, who has since passed away, never spoke about on the record. He was very protective of the zoo, and he was a real champion of Alexandria. So he never went out and told people publicly what really went down with the catfish pond. But I was able to get on pretty good authority the truth about this. So,
and then he went missing. What's the story there?
Well, yeah. So there's like several things about him, right? He, I think, was in a fight with. The thing you need to know about this guy, first of all, is that he modeled his political career, his whole persona, after Earl K. Long. Earl K. Long was his hero. Of course, Earl K. Long actually died in Alexandria. He died at Baptist Hospital, which is now Rapides Regional Medical Center, after suffering a heart attack only a couple of days following his victory in the Democratic primary for the 8th Congressional District. So he was actually Congressman-elect Earl Long when he died. At any rate, this was Tilly Snyder's hero, his mentor. This is the guy that a lot of people compared him to. He compared himself to. And sort of like Uncle Earl, Tilly Snyder was very creative with the way he went about attacking his opponents.
That's a very
had developed,
diplomatic way of putting it.
Well, he had a radio program that basically he was on KSYL talk radio a lot at the time. He got sued multiple times for defamation. One of the cases actually went all the way up to the State Supreme Court, and Mayor Snyder won that case. But these suits, by the way, people suing him were like half of the city's business community. The publisher of the Town Talk was in this lawsuit. Several prominent Alexandria citizens filed suit against him, and they all lost. But he was pretty vicious, known to be very vicious with the way he attacked his opponents. Sometimes it worked in his favor, sometimes it didn't. But the reason that he went missing, from what I gather, is that he was in some sort of fight with the city council over the budget. And I guess decided that if they couldn't find him, he could somehow delay the inevitable, you know?
So he just didn't come to
He
work.
also lived in Pineville, by the way, which not many people talked about at the time, but he really legally wasn't even supposed to be able to run for mayor.
Because you have to live in Alexandria.
Right. He lived in Pineville across the Red River. I guess people didn't really mind that much back then. I worked in that building in City Hall in Alexandria. It's the new City Hall, is what they call it. And I know the story about the men's room, right? I think that is a true story. The mayor's office has its own private bathroom that's next to it. And I do believe that he actually did remove the door because he believed his chief of staff was spying on him. I think that is true.
Wow.
As to the stories about him wandering around mumbling about Russian spies, I'm not sure that's the case. I don't know.
I think another thing that you said that I love how you pointed out versus Tilly Snyder and Earl Long is that Earl Long kind of had this great attack method when he would campaign too, but it usually was sharp and funny. But Tilly Snyder just wasn't hitting the mark.
Yeah, that's so true. And Huey P. Long also was sort of a master at nicknaming his opponents, and they were always funny names like Turkey Head Walmsley, the mayor of New Orleans at the time. Just playful stuff. I mean, Huey could also be pretty vicious, but so were his opponents, But there was always humor about the way that the Long brothers went after people. Tilly Snyder wasn't funny. It was just plain old mean, It's a lesson to be learned there. At the end of his life, I think that he had, you see comments from people that worked with him and that opposed him that were still thankful for his contributions to the city. He had, expanded the city's footprint quite a bit and brought African Americans into leadership positions, which, is a pretty big deal. But yeah, I think he'll forever be remembered for his quirky, zany, sort of autocratic, weird decisions that he made. Incidentally, he ran the first time he won the Alexandria mayor's race. He had campaigned for 4 different offices in the 4 years. So he was constantly campaigning. Ran for sheriff of Rapides Parish, ran for Congress. He ran for various other jobs other than the mayor. And his narrow victory, though, he actually was he served, I think, 2 terms, but they were not consecutive. So he came back. Well,
the song, I need to find this. What is John's song?
Jay Chevalier, he has a song called The Ballad of Earl K. Long. Jay Chevalier, I think that I'm saying his name right. He's a pretty famous Central Louisiana musician. I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But yeah, Tilly Snyder took an ad out in the Town Talk and offered a $250 reward for any local singer who can put together the best John K. Snyder campaign theme song. So Chevalier, who had already was pretty well known for his Ballad of Earl K. Long song, I guess won the competition. And for some reason, my late father had the record. So now I have the John K. Snyder. I have not listened to it. It's got to be online somewhere. It's called John's Song. I think that he had done the same sort of gimmick years earlier and no one responded. But this was the time he tried to stage a comeback and run for sheriff. It didn't work, by the way.
And
the song was not a chart topper.
It was not a chart topper.
No.
And he was committed to involuntarily committed, I understand.
That's just like Uncle Earl.
Yeah.
He, Earl Long's biographers, I think make a really good argument that he probably had bipolar disorder. It's almost certain that he had bipolar disorder, Earl Long, that is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Tilly Snyder's, if he ever was diagnosed with anything, but I know people that knew him thought he was often kind of delusional, and may have sort of lost his mind at the end there.
Yeah.
It's sort of sad, but it's also kind of hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, the King Catfish, that's another, I love that you worded it that way.
Yeah.
It's clear that he was one of Louisiana's many politicians that made waves, and it's just
that's right.
A shame that the Wikipedia page was deleted. I didn't.
Yeah, his and several other, like I said, historical figures, political figures from Central Louisiana. I can't really think about the whole list, but I know that like State Senator Joe McPherson's now no longer online. His entry's gone. I want to say maybe Charlie DeWitt's is gone. Some pretty important people, historically speaking, in the sort of late 20th century have been all scrubbed from Wikipedia. So if somebody has the time and inclination, I'd be more than willing to help, but restore these entries, there's just a lot of work involved.
Yeah.
I guess the lesson here too is like, be mindful of when a Wikipedia page says this is scheduled for deletion. I guess we should be mindful of that in Louisiana, that you have to object. No one objects that it gets taken offline.
I know that if anybody can pull up a good Central Louisiana story, like, it would be you, and to keep these stories like this alive.
It's just funny. I've been told the story. I was born in '82. So I was around when this happened, but obviously not old enough to have any idea who Tilly Snyder was. But I've been told the story about the Catfish Pond. I mean, since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
It's a story that almost anyone in Alexandria has bound to have heard at least once in their life. But what I discovered over the course of researching this is that actually it was far more gruesome and not just embarrassing, but I mean, like, tragic than I thought it would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not realize that all those fish were chopped into pieces by the fan.
Right.
The city never put out a press release that said that.
Right. Can you imagine something like that happening? I mean, right now, the tweets that would come out about it,
I think that, so I did a little research into like, has any other city done this?
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Right? So I actually think that this has been done in other cities. I think Dallas, Texas, transformed or at least one of the suburbs of Dallas, transformed an old public swimming pool into a pond. But it wasn't for catfish farming. It was, it was for purely aesthetic reasons, right? And I think there may have also been a town in Tennessee that did this, but I mean, this is not considered best practice policy. So,
well, Lamar,
not recommended.
Yeah, a best practice. Well, Lamar, is there anything else that you would like to add on this?
Well, I will say one thing. One of the former mayor's opponents, and one of the people that actually sued him for defamation, was Harry B. Silver, who recently passed away at the age of 100. And had been until his resignation in, I guess, a year ago, he resigned. He had been the oldest elected official in the United States of America.
Wow.
He was a city councilman in Alexandria, which he began his career when he was 83 years old. He's mentioned in my article about Tilly Snyder, and I just wanted to
throw that out
that
there.
With a note about Harry. Yeah, he was a great man.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you did. And then, do you want to talk about your current project and how people can find you and learn more about you? And if you want to read this full article, where we can find it.
It's called Tilly Snyder is Missing Again. And Tilly, I spelled it Tilly. Some people did spell it with an IE. There's nothing consistent that I can pick up on. But it says Bayou Brief. So if you just I'll put it on the front page since, when this podcast comes out. So people, it'll be easy for people to find it. But right now, actually, I have two big projects that I've been working on for more than a year. One is a book about Carlos Marcello, the New Orleans mafia boss, the reputed mafia boss in New Orleans. It's a sort of a biography about Marcello, which is, I think he's endlessly fascinating. And another one of those Louisiana legends that there's a lot of folklore about, but not a lot of facts that are known.
I will just say this, because since you mentioned the folklore, I've been to somebody's house before who claimed it was built by Carlos Marcello. There seems around New Orleans to just be a lot of stories like that, but whether or not it's true remains, anyone's guess.
Believe me, I know. I've heard just hundreds of stories about him that, at least dozens and dozens that I've been able to debunk.
Yeah.
But Carlos liked sort of the myths around him. It was part of his, that was part of his personality. He liked being famous. He liked the fact that people, he liked being notorious, frankly.
Yeah.
And the other project that I've been working on is a book about the assassination of Huey P. Long, the truth about the assassination of Huey P. Long, which in recent years, actually, it's been a topic of controversy since the very beginning. But there's been some renewed attention to the theory that Dr. Carl Weiss, did not assassinate Huey P. Long. That it, in fact, was one of Long's bodyguards who accidentally shot him. So I'll just tell you that, this is a book that basically debunks that and also sort of gets into the, sort of what is the truth about Long? How should we understand his legacy now, especially in a post-Trump America where we had this president who a lot of people compare to Huey P. Long, So I'm excited about that, but and I'm almost done with that book. So that should come out first. But yeah, you can find me on BayouBrief.com, and I'm on Twitter as Lamar White Jr.
Again, Lamar's going to put this full story on the front page of his website, so you can read all about it in all of its glory at BayouBrief.com. Thanks so much for listening to the Only in Louisiana podcast. You can find these online at onlyinlouisiana.com or search and subscribe to Only in Louisiana, however it is you listen to podcasts.
Because only in Louisiana